My parents called my work phone and texted, "We effing hate you. Consider yourself disowned," because I refused to wire them money for my brother's kidnapping scam. Fast forward to now. They wish that's all I had done. Growing up, my older brother treated me as his slave. Whenever he had homework he didn't want to do, which was practically every day, he would tell me to do it for him. And if I ever tried to say no, he would trash my room and force me to clean it up. And I would have just told my parents. But back then, I just wanted him to love me. So instead, I chose to keep it a secret. And for years, I told my parents about how happy I was to have Trent in my life. And my lies were good. Too good, actually. So much so that when he broke my hand after refusing to do his homework for 5 days straight, they didn't believe me. Trent would never do that, my dad said before slapping me across the face for telling lies. And even though my intuition was screaming at me to get revenge on Trent, I didn't. Because I knew that if he was never punished for being abusive towards me, then his behavior would eventually pass on to my parents. And I was right. Because when I was 16 and Trent was 19, I caught him stealing money from our mom's purse in the middle of the night. But I knew telling on him meant putting my life in danger, so I kept it a secret. Over the next few weeks, I heard him sneaking out at 2 a.m. every weekend. And whenever he returned home, he would make the entire apartment reek of the devil's lettuce. I wasn't sure if my parents knew or not, but a month later, I finally got my answer. Because just as Trent walked in at 6 a.m., my dad caught him. "Trent, what's going on, buddy? You've been coming home reeking of dar eggs for weeks now." I tensed up, and that's when I heard a smack. "I'm an adult. I can do what I want," was all Trent said in response, before going to bed and sleeping for the entire day. When he woke up and joined us for dinner, I expected my dad to hit him back, or at least tell him what he did wasn't acceptable. But no, he just asked Trent if he wanted some salt with his meal, and we were all forced to play happy family and pretend like everything was okay. And maybe my parents were happy to live in fear of their son, but I wasn't. So a week later, I moved in with my friend who lived a block away. Neither of my parents asked why, because they already knew the answer. I didn't talk to them much after that. Fast forward to 5 years later. I was 22, working as an operations analyst and making $50,000 a year. It was around this time that I got the call. It was my mom, and it was the first time she had called me since the day I moved out. I picked up reluctantly, and she was in tears. "Honey, me and your father need you. Trent is stuck in Colombia." I took a deep breath to gather my thoughts, and calmly asked what the F was going on. That's when I heard my dad's voice. Trent told us there was a job waiting for him in Colombia, but as soon as he got in the taxi from the airport, his buddies stole his passport, and now they won't give it back unless we pay up. "How much is it, Dad?" I asked with a sigh. "They're asking for $12,000, and if we don't pay now, it'll double tomorrow." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Dad, I'm still paying back my student loans and—" "Honey, we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, please." I walked over to the nearest mirror and stared at myself. Was this really what my life had come to? I don't even know why I agreed. I guess I just figured that at least now I would never have to hear about him again. That thought alone was enough to put me on cloud 9, and I spent the rest of the week with a huge smile on my face. But Trent found a way to ruin that too. I was fast asleep on a Thursday night when I got another call from my mom. This time I didn't pick up, and she started spam texting me about needing another $6,000 for Trent. Turns out, after the passport fiasco, my parents never forced him to come home. So Trent decided to put his trust in the same people who stole his passport, because now he was one of them, or so he thought, until they took him hostage and demanded money again. I told my mom no, because even if I wanted to help, I simply couldn't. My bank account was completely empty, and I had already sold my car to help with student loan debt. In response, her and my dad started texting me at the same time saying I was an effing disgrace, that I should have saved more money to help pay. I blocked them both, turned on flight mode, slept like a baby with a silk eye mask over my face, but they still couldn't leave me alone. 3 weeks later, my mom had somehow reached my work phone. "We effing hate you. Consider yourself disowned," was the first thing she said. Then my dad chimed in. "When we couldn't pay the hostage fee, Trent got set up by his friends for darug trafficking. Now he's being sentenced. We might never see our baby boy again, all because of you. Any other good news for me?" I responded, with a smirk on my face. I was about to hang up, but then I heard a voice in the background. It was Trent. "Tell her I'm getting 25 years, maybe she'll finally crack." My heart dropped. They weren't calling from Colombia, they were calling from home. My family had decided to take advantage of me, and I had fallen for it. I hung up immediately, my hands shaking as I set down the work phone. My coworkers were staring at me from their cubicles, but I couldn't focus on their concerned faces. I grabbed my personal phone and started changing every single password I had. Banking apps, email accounts, social media, everything. My fingers moved frantically across the screen as I enabled two-factor authentication on every account that offered it. I called my bank next, explaining that I needed to freeze my accounts and issue new cards immediately. The representative asked if this was due to suspected fraud, and I confirmed it was. They put a security alert on my account and promised new cards would arrive within 5 business days. I did the same with my credit cards, then signed up for a credit monitoring service to watch for any suspicious activity. That evening, I noticed something odd when I got home. The doormat outside my apartment was slightly askew, and there were faint scratches around the lock that I hadn't seen before. My heart raced as I carefully opened the door, checking each room with my phone ready to dial 911. Nothing seemed missing, but small things were out of place. My mail had been rifled through, and my desk drawers weren't quite closed properly. I went to the building's management office immediately. The security footage showed a figure in a hoodie trying different keys at my door around 2 p.m., eventually giving up and leaving. The build quality wasn't good enough to see their face clearly, but I knew exactly who it was. The manager suggested I file a police report and offered to change my locks for free. I spent that night at a hotel, too anxious to stay in my apartment. The next morning, I returned with a locksmith and had a deadbolt installed along with a chain lock. I also ordered security cameras online, paying extra for next-day delivery delivery. While waiting for them to arrive, I went to every neighbor on my floor, showing them a photo of Trent and asking them to call me if they saw him around. The cameras arrived as promised, and I spent Saturday afternoon installing them. One faced the hallway, another covered my door, and I put a third inside pointing at the entrance. I downloaded the app that let me monitor them remotely and tested the motion detection alerts. Everything was working perfectly when my landlord called that evening. "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "Your parents stopped by today claiming they needed to do a wellness check. Said you'd been acting strangely and they were worried. I told them I couldn't let them in without your permission." I thanked him profusely and asked him to call the police if they showed up again. He agreed, mentioning that they'd seemed pushy and made him uncomfortable. After hanging up, I checked my camera footage. Sure enough, there they were at 3 p.m., my mother crying dramatically while my father demanded entry. They'd spent 20 minutes harassing my landlord before finally leaving. Monday morning brought a new nightmare. I was reviewing my credit report when I discovered 3 credit cards I'd never opened, all maxed out. The applications had been submitted 2 weeks ago, right when my family was running their Columbia scam. The addresses were all slightly different versions of my apartment number, close enough to pass initial verification, but different enough that I'd never received the cards. I spent hours on the phone with each credit card company, explaining the situation and filing fraud reports. They required police reports for each incident, so I headed to the station with a folder full of documentation. The officer who took my report seemed sympathetic, but warned me that identity theft cases within families were notoriously difficult to prosecute. Over the next few days, I discovered more fraudulent accounts: a personal loan for $5,000, a store credit card, even an attempt to open a checking account in my name. Each discovery meant more phone calls, more paperwork, more police reports. My credit score plummeted from 750 to 480 in a matter of weeks. I had to put my plans to buy a car on hold indefinitely. The situation at work deteriorated quickly. Tuesday afternoon, my manager pulled me aside. "Your parents were here again today," she said quietly. "They made quite a scene in the lobby, claiming you'd abandoned them in their time of need. Security had to escort them out." She showed me security footage on her computer. My mother was wailing about how I'd left them to suffer, while my father shouted about ungrateful children. Several clients in the lobby looked disturbed by the display. My manager suggested I work from home for a while until things calmed down. I gratefully accepted, packing up my desk that afternoon. Working from home should have made me feel safer, but it only heightened my paranoia. Every noise in the hallway made me check my security cameras. I kept the chain lock on even when I was inside. I ordered groceries for delivery rather than leaving the apartment. My world was shrinking, all because of my toxic family. A week into my remote work arrangement, my friend Catherine called. We'd gone to high school together and still kept in touch. "I ran into your brother at the gas station," she said. "He was asking all sorts of questions about you, where you lived, where you worked, if you were dating anyone. I told him I didn't know anything, but I wanted to warn you." I thanked her and made a mental note to warn my other friends. Trent was clearly trying to gather information, probably looking for new ways to exploit me. I posted on social media warning my friends and acquaintances not to share any personal information about me with my family members. The responses were eye-opening. Several people messaged me privately, sharing that Trent had contacted them with sob stories about needing to reach me for a family emergency. He'd even offered some of them money for my new address. Thankfully, none of them had fallen for it, but it showed how desperate he was becoming. Through another mutual friend, I learned the truth about what Trent had been doing. He'd never left the country at all. He'd been living at home the entire time, dealing substances out of our parents' apartment. The money he made went straight to online gambling sites, where he'd lost thousands. My parents knew about everything but kept enabling him, even taking out loans they couldn't afford to cover his debts. The friend Nathan worked at a bank and had seen my parents' loan applications. "They're in deep," he told me over coffee. "Multiple personal loans, credit cards maxed out, even a second mortgage on the apartment. They listed you as a reference on several applications, claiming you were willing to help with payments." I immediately contacted each lender to clarify that I had not agreed to any such thing. Some were understanding, others were skeptical. I had to provide documentation proving I'd been estranged from my family for years. It was exhausting, but necessary to protect myself from further financial entanglement. My security cameras proved their worth 2 weeks later. I was reviewing the footage from while I was sleeping when I noticed movement at 3 a.m. Trent had been in my hallway, examining my door and windows. He'd spent almost an hour casing my apartment, even trying to peek through the peephole. The footage was clear enough to identify him definitively. I took the footage to the police and filed another report. The officer suggested I consider a restraining order, but warned that it might escalate the situation. I decided to wait and see if the increased security would be enough to deter him. I also shared the footage with building management, who promised to ban him from the property. The next few weeks were relatively quiet. I continued working from home, slowly disputing all the fraudulent accounts and rebuilding my credit. I'd hired a lawyer to help with the identity theft case, though she warned me that prosecution was unlikely without more concrete evidence. I kept all my documentation organized, hoping something would eventually stick. Then came the trap. I'd been thinking about how to catch Trent in the act when inspiration struck. I created fake bank statements showing a substantial inheritance from a fictional great-aunt. I made copies of fake investment account statements showing a portfolio worth $200,000. I even created a fake letter from a law firm discussing the estate settlement. I left these documents in a folder on my kitchen counter, visible from the window. Then I made a show of leaving for a weekend trip, dragging a suitcase to my car and driving away. In reality, I only went around the block, parking at Catherine's apartment where I could monitor my security cameras remotely. It didn't take long. That same night, around 11 p.m., I watched Trent approach my door. He'd gotten a copy of my new key somehow, probably from our parents who'd likely stolen my spare during one of their visits to the building. He let himself in confidently, heading straight for the kitchen where he'd seen the documents through the window. I recorded everything on my phone as he photographed each fake document with his own phone. He spent 20 minutes going through my apartment, checking drawers and cabinets for anything valuable. He found my jewelry box, which I'd filled with cheap costume jewelry for this exact purpose. He pocketed several pieces before leaving, carefully locking the door behind him. I waited until he was gone before returning home. Nothing important was actually missing since I'd moved all my valuables to a safety deposit box weeks earlier. I backed up all the security footage to multiple locations and made copies of the recordings on my phone. This time, I had him dead to rights. 3 days later, my parents called from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. My mother was crying again, claiming Trent had been in a terrible accident and needed emergency surgery. The hospital was demanding $50,000 up front, and they'd seen documentation suggesting I had inheritance money. I played along, asking for details about the hospital and the accident. They gave me an elaborate story about a hit and run, complete with a fake hospital name and room number. I told them I'd need to verify everything with the hospital directly before sending any money. They gave me a number to call, which I suspected was just Trent with a voice changer. Instead of calling their fake hospital, I called the police. I explained the situation and showed them my evidence of the break-in. They were very interested when I mentioned the ongoing fraud attempt. We arranged for me to continue playing along while they prepared to arrest Trent during the money transfer. I called my parents back, agreeing to wire the money but insisting we do it in person for security reasons. I suggested meeting at a bank downtown where I could arrange the transfer. They eagerly agreed, probably thinking they'd finally hit the jackpot. I gave the police all the details, and they assured me they'd be ready. The day of the meeting, I arrived at the bank early. The police had stationed officers inside and outside, all in plain clothes. I sat in the lobby, my hands steady despite my racing heart. My parents arrived first, looking anxious and desperate. Trent came in separately a few minutes later, probably trying to seem unconnected. I greeted them coldly and suggested we sit down to discuss the transfer. As I pulled out my phone to supposedly initiate the wire transfer, I asked Trent directly about his accident. He launched into a dramatic story, complete with fake winces of pain. I nodded along, typing on my phone as if entering transfer information. "Just one thing," I said, looking him in the eye. "How did you manage to photograph those inheritance documents from your hospital bed?" His face went white. My parents looked confused. I pulled out printed screenshots from my security footage, showing him in my apartment. "The police have the full video," I said calmly. "They're here right now." Trent jumped up to run, but officers were already moving in. They arrested him on the spot for breaking and entering, identity theft, and attempted fraud. My parents screamed and cried, calling me a traitor, saying family should protect family. I watched stone-faced as they all were escorted out, my father still shouting about how I'd ruined everything. The aftermath was swift. Going through Trent's phone, police found evidence of multiple identity theft schemes, not just against me, but against our parents too. He'd been stealing from them for years, draining their retirement accounts and taking out loans in their names. The Columbia story had been his idea, a way to squeeze money from me when our parents' funds ran dry. My parents were forced to face the truth when presented with the evidence. Trent had stolen over $100,000 from them over the years, funding his substance dealing and gambling habits. They'd been so deep in denial, so desperate to believe their golden child could do no wrong, that they'd blamed me for everything instead. Trent was charged with multiple felonies. The evidence was overwhelming, and his lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. He received 5 years in prison with mandatory substance rehabilitation. During the sentencing, he showed no remorse, still insisting everyone was against him. I didn't attend the hearing, but my lawyer kept me informed. My parents' situation was dire. With their retirement gone and massive debts in their names, they faced bankruptcy. They reached out through my lawyer, asking for help, but I maintained firm boundaries. I provided information for financial counseling services and senior assistance programs, but made it clear I would not be providing money or housing. It took months to fully repair my credit and resolve all the fraudulent accounts. My lawyer helped me sue for damages, though there was little to collect given my family's financial situation. The important thing was establishing legal documentation of what had occurred, protecting me from future attempts at exploitation. I eventually moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city, one with better security and no forwarding address. I changed jobs too, finding a better position with a company that understood my need for privacy. My salary increased to $65,000, and without my family draining my resources, I could finally start saving properly. Catherine and Nathan became my closest support system, along with other friends who'd stood by me through the ordeal. We formed our own chosen family, celebrating holidays together and supporting each other through life's challenges. It was the loving, supportive environment I'd never had growing up. A year later, I received a letter from Trent in prison. I didn't open it, instead giving it directly to my lawyer to file with the other documentation. My parents occasionally tried to contact me through various channels, but I'd gotten good at maintaining boundaries. Their messages went unanswered, their calls blocked. I focused on building my life free from their toxic influence. I started therapy to process the years of abuse and manipulation. I joined support groups for people estranged from their families, finding comfort in shared experiences. Slowly, I learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone would try to exploit my kindness. My career flourished without the constant crisis and drama. I received promotions, built professional relationships, and even started mentoring young analysts. My credit score recovered and surpassed its previous high. I bought a reliable car and started saving for a house down payment. Sometimes I wondered what might have been if my family had been different, but I'd learned that you can't choose your birth family, only how you respond to them. I'd chosen to protect myself, to build a life of peace and stability, and despite everything they'd put me through, I'd won. I was free, successful, and surrounded by people who truly cared about me. That was the best revenge of all.